Willard Willard Jenkins is a broadcaster, a writer, a producer, an enthusiast, an activist, a husband, a father.
Are you going to run all the credits, huh?
Well, I just wanted to get those out of the way because his
Uh,
latest credit
all right. Appreciate it.
is an important one, I think. And why don't you tell us what your latest accomplishment, achievement thing is going on here?
Waking up this morning.
Good to wake up.
but
Good to be here on planet Earth.
no, in all seriousness, I'm very happy and excited and eager to get started as the new artistic director, and actually the first artistic director of the DC Jazz Festival, which celebrated its 10th anniversary this past June.
Well, we know that the DC Jazz Festival, the man who put it together is Charlie Fishman.
Absolutely, and he is owed a great deal of credit. I actually had a had a little supper with him last night, and told him how much I appreciated the fact that for so many years we had various festival-like activities here in the community. There was the old East Coast Jazz Festival, which has become the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival. However, that is produced in Montgomery County, Maryland. As far as DC proper, there was always District Curator's annual 4th of July Festival, and there was the Mary Lou Williams Jazz Festival, which was once the Mary Lou Williams Women in Jazz Festival at the Kennedy Center. But as far as an annual, what I like to refer to as a full-service festival that spread throughout the community, Charlie put together a really strong entity which has grown internationally here.
So I guess my question would have to be, is Charlie still involved? Is he stepping down, or is it just evolved? Has the festival evolved to a place where more people are necessary to accomplish?
Charlie is on the board of directors and is the founder of this event.
Okay. So your official title is
Artistic Director.
Artistic Director.
As of January 5th.
As of January 5th. Well, that's
I'll assume the day-to-day responsibilities.
Okay. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the festival, could you talk to us about the nature and the excuse me, the nature and the scope of the festival? Is it spread out at different locations? Is it spread over a certain period of time? How does it proceed in the past 10 years? What's the modus operandi, the agenda for the festival?
It's spread out over multiple days. In 2015, we will be June 10th to 16th, and one of the things I talked with Charlie about was how much I admire what to me is a big tent kind of effort, where there are a number of different partners and venues who are involved in this festival, and we present over 100 performances in approximately 60 different venues around the community. And those venues range typically from places like the Kennedy Center to some of the smaller clubs in town. And some of the core activities take place at places like the Hamilton, which is I hate to call it a supper club, but it is a place where you can get a high-class meal and see a set in downtown Washington. It's operated by a local restaurant concern called Clyde's, and when I say it's known as the Hamilton is after Alexander Hamilton, and it's a 500-seat venue, and it's a beautiful space. The sound is great. And we have a series of performances at the Hamilton. We also have performances at the Bohemian Caverns. We have performances at the Historic Synagogue at 6th and I Street in downtown Washington. We have performances at Capitol Bop. Capitol Bop, some young guys, Gio Rusinello and Luke Stewart, they operate Capitol Bop, and they do a lot of things in pop-up spaces and in different lofts and warehouse spaces in and around town. And we also have a relationship. One of our partners is the East of the River Jazz Festival. So if you know anything about D.C., we're talking about east of the Anacostia River. And east of the Anacostia River is an area of town that is traditionally an African American community that is not always served by the traditional arts and culture presenters in this town. So this gives us tentacles all throughout all four quadrants of Washington. Four quadrants, of course, northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. So we are literally all over the district. And it's been a beautiful thing, the way it has evolved. Because you would have, from a stylistic perspective, you might have 3 or 4 different things going on the same night. But the way we balance things out is those will not be 3 or 4 related things. They'll all be different things. So you might have a Latin performance in one place. You might have a straight ahead trio in another place. I'm speaking hypothetically now. You might have a so-called cutting edge or avant-garde ensemble in a 3rd place, and something else in a 4th or 5th place. You know, we also engage with local entities like Twins Jazz. So we have a definite presence on U Street, which is where Bohemian Caverns and Twins Jazz are, and which is one of the hottest entertainment districts in D.C. So we literally have a big tent, and we have Jazz and Families fun days at the Phillips Collection in town, which involves jazz education, a strong jazz education component. We have humanities programs throughout the course of the festival, which could include artist interviews, panel discussions, film screenings, and those kinds of things. So we present a real multifaceted event.
Your previous experience in producing and booking and working with musicians is certainly a lot to draw upon. But one of the challenges today for an artistic director with your roots and your level of creativity is making things work financially. It's a very difficult time to get people to come out. It's a difficult time to raise money. The festival has been going for 10 years now. Where does the support come? How is the festival situated financially?
The festival is situated very well financially. The support has come from throughout the community. It's come from foundations. It's come from corporate entities. It's come from the D.C. government, the D.C. Council on Arts and Humanities, and it's come from our various board members leveraging their corporate partners and their constituents throughout the community. And we've been very, very fortunate to have much of what we've presented subsidized. And you know, I needn't tell you, but you know the drill, that when you're presenting uncompromising music, very often these days you need some measure of subsidy in order to make that work for you. And so we have had good success in that area.
Now, as you're talking here, I'm thinking about how substantial the DC jazz scene really is.
A lot of people sleep on that too.
I realize that. As someone who's been there, you kind of have to go there to see it, because in the so-called jazz press, DC really doesn't get the play that a New York or even a Philly would. Even though there's a lot less activity in Philly than there is in DC. But my question for you, Willard, is What is in terms of the performances and the workshops? What is the participation of local musicians? I know with a lot of festivals to sell tickets, it's about bringing in the national acts. How is what's the proportion of local musicians actually playing a role in the DC festival?
Well, when you consider that I'm talking about uh, upwards of 60 different venues, and when you consider that I'm also talking about uh, a good segment of free programming, presentations, and when you consider the number of artists it takes to present over that scope of those venues, uh, most definitely we engage DC's finest artists, and we have a number of exceptional jazz artists here living here in the community. We have people performing in the tradition, we have people creating original music, and we have plenty of opportunities for our DC resident artists. I don't like to refer to that term local. That's kind of a loaded term. You know, I prefer to refer to these artists as residents of this community because many of them perform throughout the world. They just happen to live here in DC.
Right.
And DC is a transportation hub for one thing, so it makes it easy for artists to be based here but to operate globally. And we definitely endeavor to present quite a lot of the resident artists.
So where are you in terms of the cycle of the next program? Have you already mapped out who's going to appear, or is it already booked, or is it planning? What's the status of the next festival?
Well, you know, the next festival is June, as I mentioned, June 2015. That's June 10th to the 16th. And as you might imagine, in this business, you really have to be out in front of the curve as far as marketing and PR are concerned. So, quite naturally, since I'm not starting officially until January 5th, a lot of the booking for 2015 has already preceded my tenure.
Right.
I'll have certain spaces and certain things I'll need to fill. I'll have certain meetings and connections with some of our partners to recommend certain things that they'll do, and that I'll listen to their ideas about what they'd like to do, and we'll fill some of those spaces. But actually, in the month of January will be our big announcement of some of the so-called headliners of the festival, and much of that work has preceded me.
Well, great. When can we?
So actually, just to continue, I'll have my first complete slate for 2016.
2016. Now, as you say that, I'm sure there are musicians who are watching this saying, how can I get booked in there? So what's your criteria, and what if musicians feel they meet that criteria and would like to get a shot at performing at the festival?
Well, you know, when you talk about a multifaceted event like this, it's hard to nail down one criteria because, you know, this music we call jazz, you know, I've used this enough so it's kind of my own personal mantra or cliche, if you will. But this music we call jazz is not one thing or another. It's a number of different ways of playing this music, all under an aesthetic umbrella called jazz. There's a number of different approaches, as you well know from your experience. There's a number of different approaches and ways of playing this music. So, you know, it's hard to say, well, you know, I'm looking for this or I'm looking for that. It's hard for me to sit here and be honest with you and nail down various things that an artist needs to pass muster. But I will say that when you're talking about a major event like this, and let's face it, when you're talking about an annual festival where you have this kind of big tent effect, you're talking about the major jazz and culture event of the annual calendar year for a given community.
Right.
And in that regard, because of marketing and publicity purposes, First thing I always recommend to artists is that they need to have some kind of presence, some kind of identity in this community, some way that our audience can identify who they are. So, for example, if someone has never played the DC market, first thing I'm going to do is to recommend places that and ways that in which they can get a foothold in this community and at least establish some kind of presence and some kind of recognition. I think it's incumbent upon a festival like ours to present the cream of the crop. And the cream of the crop sometimes doesn't quite have the same name recognition as other members of the so-called cream of the crop. And there are ways to go about achieving that name recognition, one of which is to develop a track record of performing in this market so that our community has some sense of who you are, or at least getting airplay on WPFW, which is our, as you know, is our jazz outlet for radio.
Well, it is a pretty comprehensive market in terms of opportunities for people to play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you named Bohemian Caverns and Twins, and a number of things. So I think you're offering some sound advice for musicians who are building a career and want to play at the festival. I think having a presence in DC is certainly an important component of that.
And I tell you the truth, Brett. You and I have had this conversation before, but I deal with this every day, and have been dealing with this going back to my 18 years at Tri-C Jazz Fest. I hear from artists every day desiring an opportunity to perform on a festival, and I have to tell them, well, you need to establish some kind of presence in the community. You need to establish some kind of track record of performing in the community before you approach the annual major jazz event.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with the self-empowerment tools that are available today with technology, certainly it is possible. If people want to do that, they can do that.
Yes, they can.
And of course, today's challenge for musicians is survival, because the recorded music aspect of this quote-unquote industry is basically non-existent. Most people make a living through performances, so getting gigs and working consistently is a matter of survival, life and death survival these days.
Yeah, the recordings nowadays, they're calling cards.
Absolutely. So, well, let's close this out. I'm going to ask you a couple of open-ended questions here. One is, what's your biggest challenge now as the artistic director?
My biggest challenge is living up to the legacy of this festival and trying to take the festival to the next step and trying to advance the event from an artistic perspective.
And you've, as I mentioned, worked in a number of different capacities. This is a role for you where you kind of pull everything together, all of your experience together. What is the greatest joy? What are your great joys in doing this type of work?
Oh, the greatest joy is standing off in the is sitting in the hall or standing off in the wings and experiencing the audience reception of the music that we're presenting. That's the greatest joy. The greatest joy of all is to experience the audience's perception and enjoyment of what you're doing, and to be able to put something together where people will spend their hard-earned dollars to come out and enjoy themselves, and then standing back and watching as they do enjoy themselves. I actually got into this whole aspect of presenting jazz starting back in the early 1980s when I worked with a group of people to develop the Northeast Ohio Jazz Society in Cleveland. And we developed that not-for-profit organization for the specific purpose of presenting performances in the community because we had a great jazz club in the late 70s, early 80s called the Smiling Dog Saloon. And once that place bit the dust, it kind of cut off the pipeline. We weren't getting a whole lot of touring artists coming through town. So we developed that not-for-profit as a means of presenting concerts. And we did that to varying degrees of success. But, you know, it was something that I hadn't anticipated being involved in putting on performances, but something I found great joy in was the idea of putting something on stage that I appreciated artistically and seeing an audience enjoy and appreciate that same thing. It's a great joy.
Well, in a few months, audiences in the D.C. area are going to be able to share that joy with you. One more time, the dates of the upcoming festival and your website address, please.
Oh, well, the DC Jazz Fest website is www.dcjazzfest.org. That's dcjazzfest.org. The dates of June of 2015 are June 10th to the 16th.
Great, Willard. Thanks very much for joining us. Willard Jenkins, the newly appointed Artistic Director of the DC Jazz Festival. We're excited about it. We're excited to see what Willard does. And if you're in the DC area in June, that is the place to be. I'm Brett Premack. Thanks again.